Hello, we are the College Football Insiders, a CBS Sports podcast that covers all things college football with intel unmatched. You won't find this anywhere else, folks. At least that's what I think. We are live on YouTube right now, but if you are not watching live, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review if you'd like on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. And also make sure to hit the like button and subscribe button on YouTube on the CBS Sports College Football channel. I'm Brendan Marcello, your host today. This is episode 2. We've made it, folks. I'm joined today by our insiders, Richard Johnson, Shahan Jayaraja, and John Talty. We've got a lot to get to, guys, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. The sports world, or college football world, we've got caught up in some rumors, salacious things, reality television. I don't know what you want to call it or whatever, but Oklahoma quarterback Jon Gruden, his Venmo payments from 3 years ago were dug up actually by a quote unquote fake reporter by the name of Brian Aguada. Might be misspelling that or mispronouncing that name, but it doesn't matter because he doesn't exist. Originated this on Twitter and it spread like wildfire. That Jon Gruden sent some payments to a former teammate at Washington State back in 2022 that were labeled as sports gambling. Well, of course, this spread like wildfire on social media. It didn't take long for people to start going, oh boy, he's breaking rules and everything. And then a little less than 24 hours later, Jon Gruden finally responded to these accusations that he was gambling because, of course, that's against NCAA rules and players can lose at the very least 50% of their eligibility for the upcoming season if they are found guilty of gambling on their own sport. So he released this statement, which we're going to show for you here on the screen. He said, "The allegations that I once participated in sports gambling are false. My previous Venmo descriptions did not accurately portray the transactions in question, but were instead inside jokes between me and my friends. I have never bet on sports. I understand the seriousness of the matter, but recognize that, taken out of context, those Venmo descriptions suggest otherwise. I can assure my teammates, coaches, and officials at the NCAA that I have not engaged in any sports gambling." So, OU also released a statement saying, they're aware of everything. They're looking at it. But right now, nothing's come of it. We know the NCAA isn't necessarily investigating any of this. I talked to someone, a very well-placed source that said that the U.S. integrity system, which monitors gambling across college athletics for a lot of these conferences, they told me that Jon Gruden's name never came up over the last several years. So where do we stand on this? And also, just what are your thoughts? Can anything come of this? Will anything come of this? Is this something that's going to be shadowing over Jon Gruden as they get ready for their season opener here in a couple of weeks?
Well, I think one piece of this that we have to get into is let's say that this is real. Let's say that he gambled with a friend. How do you prove that? Right? All we have in terms of evidence is a random screenshot. So ultimately, unless one of the two people involved in this come out and say this was gambling, it's impossible to prove. If I gamble with Brandon and I hand him a $10 bill, there's no paper trail, right? There's no investigation to be had. So ultimately, that's why I think that this can't really go anywhere. Oklahoma said, we're not aware of any investigation against him by the NCAA. I don't think that there's enough evidence to make something like that happen. So let's get that out of the way first. I don't think that there's realistically going to be any sort of investigation, any sort of suspension, anything like that. This is such an indicator of this new world that we live in, where every tiny thing is going to be put under scrutiny in a different kind of way. It's kind of funny, frankly, that Venmo payments are as public as they are after the Jon Gruden situation. People found screenshots of all sorts of other college football players with, hilarious captions dating back 4 or 5 years of sending, money to players or whatever like that, right? And so I don't think it's ultimately going to matter, but this is the last thing that Oklahoma needs, is another distraction, is another thing hanging over, another moment for Jon Gruden to not be focused on his most important job, which is going out and winning football games.
Sean, you and I went back and forth yesterday, kind of texting each other about who had or hadn't said anything regarding the situation, right? You talk about the principals involved. His former teammate at Washington State, when they both were at Washington State, now that former teammate is at Abilene Christian University, and Abilene isn't saying anything either. So if nobody's saying anything, you don't really have much. I do think the statement in general is really quite interesting because, again, the Venmo transaction in question says sports gambling, UCLA versus USC, the day after UCLA played USC. I believe it was the fall of 2022. So I understand we all have knucklehead inside jokes with our friends that we may put in Venmo citations, but I don't really get what the inside joke is if the game was quite literally the day after or the day before you made the Venmo transaction. So that is one thing that we do need to discuss. If you're somebody who's in the public eye, like a John Mateer, you have to make all of these things private. I mean, and the one thing that Brandon was kind of talking about that I think is interesting, you mentioned U.S. integrity in kind of a roundabout way. U.S. integrity doesn't have a ton to do with this, because John Mateer didn't actually use, apparently, a FanDuel or a DraftKings or an official betting app. Sports gambling, online sports wagering, was not legal in the state of Washington, is not legal in the state of Washington at the time that these Venmo transactions happened. And that's kind of the funny thing about this. If he would have used a FanDuel or DraftKings, he would have been caught, a la the Iowa State players, that they found all of that stuff with the Iowa State athletes. I believe it was a couple of years ago, but it's hard, as Shahan's saying, to prove this when it's just something like a Venmo transaction. And I basically think that's the gauntlet that both Oklahoma and Mateer are throwing down, John.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off what you're saying there, Richard, because I think you make a really interesting point about the statement in general. And I agree with what everybody's saying here. I think it's unlikely there are any serious repercussions for John Mateer or Oklahoma here, just because the burden of proof is really high. But specifically, when you make definitive statements, as he did, all it takes is one person to disprove it, and all of a sudden you're pointed out as a liar. So when he says, I have never bet on sports, little John Mateer might have had an 8th grade friend that they bet $5 Cowboys games, and now he's a liar. So that to me is, when you're that strong in a statement, you better be right. Because again, I've never engaged in sports gambling. I've never bet on sports. That's very strong. And again, everybody grows up differently, but like, I remember being in middle school doing March Madness pools, and we'd put $5-10 on them. Guess what? I was gambling on sports back then. So I find it a little unlikely. Maybe it's just conspiracy John that thinks there might be some stretching of the truth in that statement. But that's something that I think could pop up down the line. Do we really care? I don't know. But I just think that's the statement. The wording is interesting.
No, and I don't think that we ultimately will care. I will tell you. So John Mateer grew up not far from where I live right now. He was in Little Elm, a town outside of Frisco. And that area, Denton and Collin County, are in very close proximity to Oklahoma and the casinos right across the border, right? Now, you don't typically do sports gambling there, but like you said, the statement maybe even is a little stronger than it needs to be. Because here's the reality, right? Is that the problem with this right now is that he was a Pac-12 quarterback allegedly gambling on a Pac-12 game against teams that he might have played against. By the way, that game was the 48-45 thriller between USC and UCLA. Tremendous game. Caleb Williams and Dorian Thompson-Robinson going in that one. A second straight episode with the Dorian Thompson-Robinson mention. How about that? But again, what he needs to say and prove ultimately is that there is no evidence that can corroborate any of this. And ultimately now, again, unless more evidence comes to the forefront, I don't think that anybody's going to be running through John Mateer's past. I don't think that the NCAA is going to send enforcement to Little Elm to go look through his drawers or anything like that. So for now, keep your nose clean, stay out of trouble. And again, this is the last thing that Oklahoma needs, is to have to worry about something like this.
Well, I think the last thing they need is John Mateer to go down with injury. But here's the thing. If I was John Mateer, you might as well have just said, prove it, because you can't prove it. If it was just a transaction between your teammates.
Don't challenge them. Don't challenge them.
You can label it whatever you want or whatever, but how do you know that it was actually me betting on a game? There's no platform to show that I was betting on a game. What I was betting on, for that matter, was I betting on the spread? Was I betting on the total points? I mean, prove it. They don't have anything concrete here. Even I think if they did some digging, unless his teammate just straight up says, hey, yeah, he's betting. And by the way, there's a lot more where that comes from. In the end, this is going to end up, I think, my opinion, going to be a nothing burger.
Yeah, and look, I do think we all understand that sports betting is absolutely ubiquitous. It is certainly not going anywhere. But if you are an athlete, you cannot bet on sports, much less literally your own sport, against opponents in your league that you may play. I'm not zero sum, zero tolerance on a lot of things in life, but this is one I am. If you are an athlete, you cannot bet. You just can't do it. At least
it's an integrity thing. If the integrity of the game is compromised, the entire business model of the game is compromised, right? And like, again, I think sports writers can get a little highfalutin about things, but like, this is one of those things where it's like, no, if people don't trust that college football is a real sport, then like, it isn't a real sport. Right? Like, it isn't something that you can build billion-dollar partnerships on and all this sort of stuff, right? So no, 100%. If there's gambling, it needs to be snuffed out. I'm hopeful, frankly, big picture, that some of these enforcement cases create that level of, warning to college athletes. But like you said, Richard, this isn't one of those things where it's like, well, everybody else can gamble. It's no big. No, I mean, this is a big deal because they are the actual participants that are on the field.
I mean, as people have, go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I think honestly, the biggest impact of this is that it's going to be a PSA to athletes and agents everywhere. Make your Venmo private. Make your Venmo private. And I think we went through this in the past of Twitter when everyone was digging up what athletes did at 13 or whatever. And like, I think people learned, all right, I'm going to clear out my Twitter before, I make it to the big leagues. Like, you just got to be careful. I learned this lesson. I once had an ex find out I was dating someone new based on a public Venmo transaction. Made them all private a couple years ago.
Come on, John. Come on.
I know. I didn't know. And then you find out you can make them private. And I've had it for a couple years now. So you got to keep the transactions private. Anybody can find you. And, listen, I love seeing Julian saying paid for a Minions movie a couple years ago. That was hilarious. But like, he probably doesn't need that out there. Clear him out, make him private. That's
here's the thing. Which Minions movie? It really depends because there's a quality difference there. Here's the other thing. I mean, we've been hearing this for a decade or so. And I've had people tell me this in compliance offices. They're like, we know players are betting on sports. They might not be betting on their own sports, but we know they're doing it because they're teenagers or getting into their 20s. And also, sports betting is much more part of the fabric and the culture now than it ever has been. I mean, everywhere you see it's on your TV screens while you're watching games. And now, of course, you can just pick up your phone and bet, making it much easier. This is a problem that's not going to go away, I fear. We're going to be hearing more things like this. People are going to be digging stuff up. And that's why a lot of these conferences, as we mentioned, have partnered up with folks like U.S. Integrity to look at all this, right? So they can study it, look at some potential red flags that come up, but also, listen, we're in this era where, all it takes is for a player to be sitting around bored one night, or maybe they've had one too many things to drink, and they just go, hey, I'm going to check out this gambling app. And they end up pushing a button and they bet $5 on something. But I don't think this is going away. All right. But I think John Mateer's in the clear, in my opinion. I just don't see, unless they find something else outside of screenshots from his Venmo, it's interesting. But one last quick thing, and we're going to move on here real quick. This whole situation reminded me, I don't know if you guys remember the early 2000 teens. Remember Sports by Brooks? Like the screenshots and all that stuff. This is what that reminded me of, like an intrepid reporter who's just on his own getting screenshots of something. I had some good memories of that, or should I say bad memories, while I was covering the Cam Newton stuff. Anyway, let's go. Let's move on. Alabama named their starting quarterback, Ty Simpson, the guy everybody kind of assumed, but now it's official. Ty Simpson, now the Tide starting quarterback. John Talty wrote a great column breaking it all down. John, why is this a good fit, a good recipe for the Tide as they try to get into the playoff?
Yeah, I've been a Ty believer for a while. I think that he, obviously the pedigree's there. He's son of a college football head coach, former 5-star recruit, had opportunities to go to a lot of different places, ended up, coming to Alabama, and he's waited. And so I think there's natural skepticism. This guy has not played a lot. Really, the most time we've seen him play It's against South Florida, and probably one of the ugliest games I've ever seen. And if you can remember, it's famously where a rain-soaked Nick Saban looked like he was going to retire in that moment. And so that's really the highlight of his career so far. So I understand, all right, what's this guy going to do? But, again, really smart player, has a good arm, more athletic than people give him credit for, which I know is a cliche, but talking to his coaches and people have worked with him, like, he is fast, he can run. We've seen bits and pieces of it. And so I think just overall, it's not just him, but I think with Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator, who was initially the guy, went to the Seahawks, now he came back, him paired with Ty, I think is going to open up this offense. I think he's going to be able to bring some of the stuff that Milroe had, not all of it, but some of it, and be a more effective passer, can hit the little gimmies, as Kalen DeBoer has talked about. And I think it's just going to open up their offense to be, more efficient, have some different things that they can do, more versatile than we saw them a year ago. And it's why I'm very bullish on them to be a playoff team. I mean, I know that's kind of not the highest bar for an Alabama team, but I do think Ty plus Grubb plus all the other pieces they have coming back makes me feel like this Alabama team almost a little underrated before the season starts.
Yeah, what I think is interesting about it is when you talk about what this Alabama offense is going to look like this year with Ty Simpson versus Jalen Milroe, it's funny. Alabama was kind of a little bit handcuffed and hamstrung by literally having Jalen Milroe last year. I mean, you guys have all seen Jalen Milroe run. You probably want that dimension on the field. I mean, it's why they built that big lead against Georgia, for instance. Just to sort of take that as an example, the guy can do breathtaking stuff with the football in his hands, but you have to take the good with the bad, and they did with his limitations as a passer. And so now when we transition, you wonder if, will this thing look like it did at Washington with Michael Penix, with somebody who's a little bit more of a natural passer? Alabama's got at least a couple of receivers that are as good as that receiver group in Washington that led the Huskies to the national championship game against Michigan. So we'll see what this offense can look like. It's also been kind of a winding road for Ryan Grubb here after he obviously went to Seattle, and it just didn't really go well. I mean, you heard from the beginning of his time in Seattle that he's a little in over his head at the NFL level was Ryan Grubb. So I'm interested in how Grubb has changed from his experience in the NFL and how that changes this offense with Ty Simpson.
Well, and I think something that we can't lose sight of is, like, nobody sits like this anymore, right? Nobody as a 5-star player just waits their turn. And I think that one of the best comparisons that we have to it, who is not a player of this caliber, but was Mac Jones, right? On that 2020 team, who sat behind Tua for multiple years and said, you know what? Like, I want to be the quarterback at Alabama. Maybe I can transfer and go somewhere else, but I'm going to be as prepared as I possibly can be when my moment comes. And I think that the Grubb piece and really just the offensive structure piece is well taken, because last year, and with Jalen Milroe in the lineup, this has not been an offense that looks like a normal college football offense. It's where it almost forces you to get into like gadgetry and stuff like that, just because of the limitations that Jalen Milroe had as a short to intermediate passer. Well, now all of a sudden it's like, dude, the 11-yard out is there for Jeremy Bernard, right? Like, it's just a different type of offense, a different type of challenge. And when you look around this team, I mean, their defense played relatively well last season, and I think they'll take a step under Kane Womack in year 2. But like, I think that this offensive line might be one of their best units as well. Multiple players rather, who ended up in consideration for our preseason CBS Sports All-America team. So if they're just able to maximize what's there, and then you add Grubb's fearlessness as a play caller, I mean, I think there's a lot of upside there. Now, they still have to figure themselves out. It's still a different challenge being the offensive coordinator at Alabama and trying to manage games versus being at Washington and being able to go home free all the time. But I do think that this is a strategy that could work. And like you said, John, not exactly the highest bar for Alabama to be competing for the playoff. I mean, they nearly got in last year when they were frankly not a very good team. But I think that the upside is even higher. I think they'll be right in the middle of the SEC title race, and I could see them as a team pushing for a bye if some things break right for them.
The biggest development this offseason for Alabama by far was getting Ryan Grubb back on campus after only being there a few days. Him and Kalen DeBoer, much aligned, left hand, right hand. They've worked together before. They go a long way back. They trust each other. And I think this is just obviously a natural fit. And finally, after a year, we're going to get to see what this offense that they envisioned was going to be. And obviously now with Ty Simpson being able to fit that mold, I think it's going to be much more explosive. I'm looking forward to it. All right. We're going to take a quick break here on the College Football Insiders. But on the other side here, we're going into camp intel. Preseason camps underway. A lot of stuff to get through. Florida, Florida State. 2 playoff teams from last year. And then we're going to hit on a lot of injury situations and running back spots at some big-time programs. Much more after this.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
Welcome back, College Football Insiders. We are back, and we're going to get into a lot of camp intel information we've been digging on and luckily going to be able to present to you. And for really the first time, you're probably going to see it or hear about it anywhere. We want to start at Florida, where, Richard, there's been some injuries there at receiver, maybe 4 to 5 guys at some point during preseason camp. And to me, the big issue is quarterback DJ Lagway that we're expecting a lot out of this year. The quarterback, when healthy last year, was able to play. Florida was almost unbeatable. They only lost 1 game when he started, right? And so he comes into this year after dealing with an arm injury back in the spring. Then he gets in preseason camp, and he's being dealt with a leg issue of some sort. So there's some injury concerns, a history, a trend there that might give people pause about Florida as a potential playoff team this year as they continue on the rise. But Richard, what's going on there? Is this, the quarterback's dealing with issues. We've had receivers dealing with issues. And as we know, you got to get that rhythm going with your receivers. And if guys are coming and going with injuries, that could be an issue when you open the year.
Yeah, Brandon, as far as DJ Lagway is concerned, obviously last year he had the hamstring injury against Georgia. He then had the core muscle injury that he actually had surgery on, and a shoulder injury that he didn't have surgery on, but is something that is lingering. Didn't really throw actively in spring practice, and then got kind of a late start. So now he's at full go, but he had a calf injury earlier in camp that was a minor injury, but it's something that when you stack it all together, you can understand why people are a little bit anxious about just can DJ Lagway hold up health-wise. I spoke to him at SEC Media Days. He says he's all good to go and ready to go. So we'll see how he stays healthy over the course of the season. But his wide receiver room, something of a different story. Eugene Wilson, who missed games at the end of last season, had surgery. He has returned to practice in a limited capacity because he had a lower body injury that has hampered him in the early part of this training camp. Florida's still easing him back into things. He's not full go yet, even though he was seen without a non-contact jersey on in the open media portion of practice earlier this week. Florida's also dealing with an injury with freshman Dallas Wilson. He'll be out about another week. He's got a cast around his foot up to his mid-calf. He's a 4-star recruit that I think Florida will be leaning on to be a key contributor in that wide receiver room, which Florida thinks is going to be a strength. They think they're going to have a diverse offense in the building there at Florida. Also, Aiden Mizell, who is a contributor, he is back at practice. He was held out of a scrimmage over the weekend with a soft tissue injury that he'd been dealing with. He's back, and he is, as I understand it, at full go. As far as Trey Wilson and Dallas Wilson are concerned, Billy Napier spoke on Monday. He said he'd call them day to day, week to week. That's how he would describe it. Day to day, week to week. Guys, aren't we all?
Yeah, but we're in our 30s. I don't know whether kids who are 19.
I'm in my 40s. How dare you?
Sorry. I didn't realize
Are
y'all
you a
were
man,
old.
Brandon?
Yeah. No, but I think that my concern, because I expect all these guys will be back and healthy relatively quickly, is, when you look at DJ Lagway last season, the talent jumped off the page. Like, we know that it's there. It's the consistency that we needed to see, right? We love him on the deep passes, but it's the, hey, can you be a 65% passer on short to intermediate throws? And now without those guys in the lineup and not even getting into Lagway himself, I mean, that's my big concern, is not getting to work through some of these reps in camp and not getting to build chemistry with what I agree should be a really talented receiver room. That's something that concerns me. And I mean, look, we've talked at length about the Florida schedule and what it was last year and what it should be this year. They get no time to adjust. Long Island and South Florida in the first 2 games. Then they go number 9 LSU on the road, number 10 Miami on the road, Texas at home at Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and then Georgia. Like, you don't get a whole lot of leeway to necessarily build relationships with players once the bullets start flying. And so I'm a little concerned that ultimately this could end up being not necessarily a long-term injury situation, but a long-term development issue.
Yeah, I mean,
It'll be interesting to watch. Go ahead, John.
No, I'm curious. Like, are you guys buying or selling Florida this year? Because I do kind of, to some of the points that Shahan's making, I'm kind of a sell on Florida, just because, you know, I love the DJ talent, and I've been a big Billy Napier believer for a long time. You know, covered him when he was an assistant coach at Alabama. Great guy. I think how he handled the pressure and noise last season was so admirable. But again, you look at their schedule, and I thought he did such a good job just to get to 8-5 a year ago. I think that they're going to be better this year, but are they getting to that 9-10 win mark? Feels hard. So, I mean, I see people, their preseason top 15, friend of the program, Josh Bate, has them top 10. Like, it's hard for me to feel like they're going to get to that level. They feel like a team that's a sell for me right now, but I'm curious what the rest of you guys think.
John, I think
they
Florida
play 7 AP top 25 teams in the preseason, the most in the country, right? That's insane.
Yeah, you know, the schedule thing with all these teams, I'm like, okay, well, the schedule looked hard last year, and then Ole Miss wasn't that good coming down the stretch, and LSU wasn't that good down the stretch, and Florida beat them, and Florida State went 2-10. So with the schedule thing, I'm like, all right, we'll see how it shakes out. But to me, I think Florida sets up something like a South Carolina team. I think at the end of the season, Florida's kind of ranked in the teens. I think because they're an SEC team, you could probably make a shout about them trying to sneak in the playoff. But I do not think Florida right now is a college football playoff caliber team. I think it's a little too early for them to be that. I do think they could be somebody that could seriously shake up the SEC race. If you upset a Georgia, if you beat an LSU, if you beat a Texas, one of these teams, if Florida can get one of these teams, it makes the SEC championship race seriously interesting. But I don't think Florida is right there to be a playoff team just yet.
No, and I'd agree with that. And I mean, here's the blessing, though, is that because DJ Lagway played so much last year, I mean, you still have another year with him. So when he's heading into 2026, like, I don't think that this is a playoff or bust, for example, type of season at Florida. A lot of their receivers that we just talked about are young. They're still doing a great job of developing in the trenches. That's always how this team wanted to be built, right? Was through the trenches. I think they've done a good job there. You know, their offensive line last year was kind of the breakout unit that not enough people talked about, led by Jake Slaughter. So, and the other piece of this too is, like, for all how hard the middle of the schedule is, and like you said, we don't know exactly how it's all going to shake out. Things are going to, you know, some team's going to jump up, some team's going to fall down. I mean, they should, frankly, end the year on a 4-game winning streak. Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. We'll see if any of those teams kind of overperform, but, like, that is very much on the table. So if you steal one from one of the 4 top 10 teams on your schedule, which is crazy, you're in really, really good shape. So I almost feel like it's unfair to... This is one of the reasons why I didn't love that they were ranked top 15, is I feel like it's putting an unfair expectation on them to be something that they're not really being asked to be in 2025.
The problem is Florida fans are asking for everything at Florida. They want everything. They want that playoff spot. That's in that Gator blood. And I've talked to former coaches that go down there, and, like, you win a national championship and the next year you fall just short, and it's like they want you gone. They're questioning every move you're making. You're in the grocery store shopping, and they're asking you about a third down call. It's like that in a lot of programs, but
you're eating
Florida
pizza
is
in the parking lot after a tough loss.
Meanwhile, in the state of Florida, at Florida State, they had a defensive back, Conrad Hussey, who you may remember as a true freshman was phenomenal. Really kind of came onto the scene, hampered a little bit, was benched last season. Well, he's no longer with the program there, and it comes on the heels of this past weekend of defensive coordinator Tony White being very disappointed with their second scrimmage of preseason camp and saying, quote, there's some guys who need to, quite frankly, step their ass up. Well, about a day later, Conrad Hussey was no longer with the program. No reason was given, but my sourcing down in Tallahassee tells me that Conrad Hussey had a physical altercation with a position coach at Florida State, which led to him no longer being with the program. And as one source told me, it wasn't a good look for Conrad Hussey, and it also wasn't a good look for the position coach. And we say all that to say this. You guys have probably seen Mike Norvell this offseason talk a lot about how the attitude, the demeanor of the team last season was not all congealing together. They didn't really want it. He's just come out and said that. They were 2-10. He said we had to go in, kind of rebuild the roster and bring guys in that would buy into our vision. You saw Mike Norvell at ACC Media Days practically yelling, talking about his team, about how they feels like the room is all together. So you can see why things were pretty heated in the preseason camp and practices there at Florida State, and why Tony White was coming out after a scrimmage, just absolutely calling everybody out on that defense, and Mike Norvell wanting this team to be a lot different with their attitude and their demeanor than the team last season. My question, though, for you guys here is Mike Norvell's messaging about that getting across, because it's one thing to say it. It's another thing for the players to buy into it. And I'll add this too. They recruit very well at Florida State. We know that, right? But Conrad Hussey is yet another failure among the blue chip guys, right? I was looking back. The 2023 class, only one of the 9 4-star recruits is a starter on this team. And so Mike Norvell always been criticized about retention and what he does in the transfer portal. And now he's sending out this message about trying to get everybody together. And you're seeing a player leave after a physical altercation. What's going on in Tallahassee, guys? What's your feeling?
Well, Brandon, I would say this is just my guess. This is not a sources thing, but my guess is this is not the first thing that's happened here. This is a straw that broke the camel's back situation, I would imagine, just kind of reading between the lines about how these things usually go. I think your point there is well taken about with Florida State, it is a problem of development. It's a problem of development with high school players. They are not developing high school athletes well enough in Tallahassee. And so you're dealing with the situation where you've got to augment these rosters with transfer portal parts. When it hits, and it's really nice. And you go undefeated and you get shut out of the playoff. But when it misses, as it did last year, it's about as bad of a season that a program like Florida State of Florida State's caliber could ever envision happening. I think it's beyond the pale. You could never imagine Florida State would have a season that poorly. So yeah, the question of development is the one that lingers over this program, Brandon.
We shall see moving forward here this upcoming season. A lot of pressure, a lot of eyes on Florida State after all the changes they made this offseason, not just in the transfer portal, but with the coaching staff as well. Let's talk about a couple of playoff teams last year, maybe quote-unquote surprise playoff teams that maybe not a lot of people were talking about. Some camp intel here. Arizona State and SMU. Arizona State, of course, winning the Big 12 title last year and making it to the playoff. A couple of things I've been hearing from sources out there is that defensive tackle CJ Fight has been a, quote, freak. And they believe that both of their safeties are going to be NFL players next year. Meanwhile, at SMU, they believe they've got the best tight end room in the ACC, and that's hard to argue if they have a healthy RJ Maryland back there. All right, we saw him come onto the scene last season, just a very long, rangy guy, can make incredible catches in traffic. We saw several of those last season. Kind of that hybrid tight end receiver we really like to see in college football these days. He got injured last season, I think in the Duke game, was out for the rest of the way. End up having to have ACL surgery. I'm told that he is back running full speed, running his routes, and now it's just a matter of let's keep him healthy, take it easy on him so we can get into the season healthy. But that tight end room is very, very good at SMU, something to look at there. Now, when it comes to Arizona State and SMU, guys, did we learn anything about, one, how those rosters were built, and also just game day coaching, in-season coaching, that other programs maybe could learn from that are trying to kind of bust through the ceiling and make the playoff? Because Arizona State and SMU, definitely haven't been those type of programs in recent years.
Well, and I want to draw us to a comment by Home Squad Sports. Too many teams are coming up short with development. Then they gamble with their portal shopping. I think these are two programs that have done a really good job of managing that piece of things. They've done the high school recruiting and development, right? RJ Maryland is a kid that SMU managed to keep home. He's from DFW. He was a borderline 4-star recruit, and he's turned into one of the best players, I think, in the ACC if he can get healthy. And I think that the same is true with Arizona State. Their first year, they had a crazy portal class, but you actually look at their run to the Big 12 title last year, this was about them having guys who were back for second years with the program, even as transfers. I look at somebody, you mentioned CJ Fight. Xavier Alford is one of those safeties who was back for another year of eligibility at Arizona State. Cam Scadaboo, even last year, was a player with multiple years in that program. And even if you want to talk about running back this year, Raleek Brown was a player who missed all of 2024 with an injury. Well, he's going to benefit from the fact that he's been a part of that program for multiple years. So I think that when you're talking about building a playoff caliber team, especially, by the way, in the ACC, in the Big 12, when you're not a superpower program, this is how you do it. You got to create timelines that make sense for your roster. You can't just, because look, Georgia can be good every year. Ohio State can be good every year. And while you obviously want to be competitive every year, I think that this is a place where these programs can create advantages, is in the development aspect of things. And so I think as a coaching staff, both Kenny Dillingham and Rhett Lashley, two of the younger coaches still in college football, have done a really good job of straddling that line, of making sure that, yes, we get the most talented players that we can, but once they're here, we treat them like they were high school recruited sophomores as well.
Real quick, as we know at BYU, Jake Retzlaff had to leave the program, was facing a 7-game suspension there for violating their policies there, and now is at Tulane. But what is going on with the BYU quarterback battle here real quick, Shahan? What are you hearing?
Yeah, I'm hearing that Bear Bachmeier, the true freshman who transferred over the summer from Stanford with his brother Tiger, apparently he's been really impressive. He's in a competition right now with Trayson Bourget and McKay Hillstead, two guys who were on the roster last year who have played at the Group of 5 level. But Bear has been really a step ahead of everybody, even though he's still learning this offense new as a true freshman. And the thing that I love to hear about that is that, I mean, I just think that Bear gives him so much more upside as a player. He was a blue chip recruit when he committed to Stanford. He comes from a great football family. People might remember Hank Bachmeier, the great Boise State quarterback of a couple years ago. That's the same family.
I watched him doing an online class during a rain delay between UCF and Boise State while I was sitting in the press box.
Incredible stuff. Yeah, well, that time period was a crazy time period, but I think that if he is the guy, if he has truly separated himself as being somebody who could start week 1, and by the way, we talked about Florida's tough schedule to start. BYU has a great schedule to start for a first-time quarterback. They could easily be 6-0 heading into that game against Utah. It changes the upside. I dropped them from being among my contenders in the Big 12, 1 or 2, to like 8 or 9 after they lost Jake Retzlaff. Not because I thought that Jake Retzlaff is a superstar quarterback, but because he was asked to do so much for that team. If they have upside at that position with a really good running back in LJ Martin, with a really good receiver room with Chase Roberts, and by the way, also his brother Tiger Bachmeier, who's a really good player, it changes a lot and maybe could help elevate BYU back into that contender tier.
Few more nuggets of camp intel coming up after the break. You're listening and watching College Football Insiders.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah. We're back, College Football Insiders. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Make sure to also follow us and subscribe on all your podcast platforms, College Football Insiders. Richard, let's move to running back situations here across the campus. A lot of great stuff here you have here. I want to look at USC. You're hearing some really good stuff about one player, right?
Yeah, let's talk about Jordyn, who's a JUCO running back, came into USC in January. A quote from a USC source: "He'll be a dog. We're high on him. He's 5'9". He was one of 247 Sports' highest rated players from the JUCO ranks this transfer portal cycle. It may not have elite top end speed, but his 0 to 60 is really good. He's a one cut and go type of runner." I spoke to a high school coach in Southern California who's familiar with how USC recruits running backs, and he said he's a picture-perfect Lincoln Riley-style running back, and actually reminded him of Woody Marks, who was the Mississippi State transfer the USC took last year, rushed for 1,100 yards. Multiple people in the building at USC very, very high on Jordyn. That's a name to note as we head into the college football season. Elsewhere, running back room at Auburn, freshman Omar Mapson, very impressive. Sources compared him to Trey Mason as a callback, if you are familiar with the Auburn program. He should be a senior in high school, by the way, at Auburn High School, not at Auburn University right now.
Oh, great. I can't wait to hear about this every broadcast.
Absolutely. Reclassified, but he is a short scat back type of player that I think is going to push Damari Alston for some playing time, as well as Darrell Robinson, who is also a young player in the room there. Auburn, I think, feels really good about their running back room. And quite frankly, they feel really good about their running back room because they feel really, really good about their offensive line situation. Connor Lew, one of the best centers in the country, standout at center. Xavier Chaplin, the Virginia Tech transfer at tackle. Both of those guys are supposed to be really, really good players for Auburn. Hugh Freeze said a couple weeks ago that he's gotten feedback that they have six offensive linemen with a draftable grade. He's gotten that feedback from NFL folks. So Auburn is going to have, I think, a very, very interesting offense. We know that they've got probably the best wide receiver room in the SEC with Eric Singleton and Cam Coleman. But what do they have at quarterback, Brandon? Auburn's a place you know very, very well. What do you think they're going to be on offense this season?
Jackson Arnold needs to be comfortable back there. I don't think he was comfortable in OU's offense because of some of the injuries they dealt with early last season, the offensive line. Also, Jackson Arnold had to honestly win some games for them early in the year, the non-conference, having to run the ball a little bit. I think he was just shook up quite a bit. They didn't have confidence in him as a coaching staff, but they got all full confidence in him at Auburn, and now he's going to be behind a really great offensive line potentially. I think that's going to help him, and those receivers are going to make him look good as long as he gets the protection. Auburn, the number one thing, though, I take from all this you said, Richard, is them being so confident in their offensive line. I covered them for 7 years. I haven't heard that since 2014. I'm being legit. It's been 11 years. They have not been through a season with the same starting five on a consistent basis since about 2014, when the years of Trey Mason and co, when they're able to run the ball effectively. If they could just have some cohesion and consistency there and not get all the injuries and then also some lackadaisical play, they'll be okay. And what I'm hearing from you is that they feel like they're going to be more than okay. So that's fascinating to watch. Richard, what's going on at Cal? I mean, goodness gracious, back in the offseason, we had 5 running backs enter the portal or leave. Do you got anybody to play running back this year?
Brandon, let's go from Auburn to Cal with a Brian Harsin segue. Why not? Brian Harsin, the new offensive coordinator.
That's why I chuckled when you did that.
Brian Harsin, the new offensive coordinator at Cal. Had a little bit of a problem on his hands with plenty of transfers. Fernando Mendoza at quarterback left. Jack Injuries, the standout tight end, left. Went to Texas. Mendoza went to Indiana. But the running back room is as ravaged a position group by the transfer portal as you will ever come across for a staff that stayed. Justin Wilcox didn't get fired. They just changed the offensive coordinator. So as Brandon stated, yes, 5 running backs left in the transfer portal, of course, including Jaden Ott, who went to Oklahoma, was a little banged up last year, but the year before was one of the best running backs in the country. Javian Thomas also left to go to UCLA. He was the guy who really toted the mail for Cal last year in Jaden Ott's absence. So I look at LJ Johnson, who's in from SMU, Kendrick Raphael, who's in from NC State, and Brandon High, who's in from UTSA, as guys who may be sharing the load in the Cal backfield. I think I am expecting a committee approach with more clarity to come in the next week or so about just how it will shake out. But there are multiple people on board on the college coaching staff with a committee approach to the backfield. It doesn't really necessarily have to be a bell cow situation for Cal. But this, to me, is one of the first things. If I'm Ron Rivera, I'm going to have to figure out how to address Ron Rivera, the new GM of Cal football, after something of a booster mutiny, now is imbued with more power as the Cal GM, because basically some influential Cal boosters during the spring looked across the bay at Stanford and what they were doing with Andrew Luck, and they said, hey, we'd like to have basically a football czar just like Luck is. So they got that power. They got Ron Rivera to have that power. Obviously, there's an athletic director change as well at Cal. So Ron Rivera is going to be running football. So there's going to be a microscope on that Cal program to me. And if they don't perform, I think Ron Rivera may be looking at making a change with that coaching staff this fall.
That is going to be fascinating to watch, because Justin Wilcox, I mean, listen, he's been a popular coach at times. I mean, heck, he was up for the Oregon job before Dan Lanning got it. They were in serious consideration. And he actually, from my understanding, actually kind of chose to stay at Cal instead of pursuing that Oregon job heavily. And let's face it, Cal, so difficult to win at. We know that. And I still think he's been doing a pretty good job, but goodness gracious, losing these pieces in the transfer portal, very difficult.
Well, and I think that the big question for me is, like, how serious are they going to be about this, right? Like, how invested are they going to be? Because I talked to people on the NIL side of the ACC, right? And nobody really knows what they're planning to do there, both them and Stanford, right? Now, I think that it's big for them, both of those programs, frankly, that they got people like Ron Rivera and Andrew Luck in the athletic department to ensure that football is prioritized. But at the same time, I mean, this is a dynamic that I'm fascinated to watch, not just with Cal, but with other programs of, look, you can fire Justin Wilcox, who has, like you said, done a pretty good job. But the question becomes, are you going to invest enough in the next guy to expect better results? Now, Justin Wilcox has been there a very long time. I think that that's a conversation that probably will be had regardless. But I mean, look, Jaden Ott last year, who obviously transferred to Oklahoma, has done, he was very clear, like, I want to be at Cal. After the season, even when they lost Fernando Mendoza and a couple other key pieces, he said, I want to be here. And it was only in the spring transfer window that he said, I can't keep doing this, essentially. So while, yes, I do think that obviously the coaching staff has some responsibility for that, it's also just ultimately, does Cal want to live in the 21st century and contend with other peer programs?
Okay, guys, that's it for our camp intel in this episode. A lot of great stuff, guys. I wanted to move on. Today was release day. CBS Sports All-American Team was released. A lot of familiar names, some really kind of easy selections, let's be quite honest. But in looking at that list, we got 11 SEC players, 8 Big Ten players, 5 true sophomores, including, I would think you would be able to guess one, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, the dynamic receiver, who, by the way, was our only unanimous selection among our group there at CBS Sports. Gentlemen, when we look at QB1, the pick was Cade Klubnik. Did anybody have any disagreement with that?
Yeah, I did not take Cade Klubnik. I took Arch Manning, just for clarity's sake. For the voting public. I
didn't take Cade either.
Yeah, I did not take
me neither.
Wow. We got a group here that just said no.
Well, how the heck did he end up on the team?
Yeah, how did he end up in the top team?
I went Chris Hummer's fault. I know it.
For the record, I went Sellers.
See, I went Garrett Nussmeier.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was such a tough year. This is, I mean, when we get into, we'll talk about it later, but championship pick, Heisman pick, QB1 pick. This is like maybe the hardest year I can remember to try to do that, which is an indication of how many of the top guys have turned over at the traditional championship programs, right? Because Ohio State is replacing their quarterback. Texas, of course, has Arch Manning coming in, but they're replacing their quarterback. Georgia's replacing their quarterback. Like there's just so much inconsistency among the top national title contenders, which obviously creates some opening. But and I'm a big Klubnik guy. I think that he's really good. I did not have him as my pick. I probably would have had him second or third if we had a more extended ballot. I'm really excited about what Garrett Nussmeier can be this year. I think that he comes in for me as the number one quarterback in the SEC. When you look at what he did last season, yes, he made mistakes, but so much was asked of him on that offense that really could not run the ball at all. And by the way, he adds a more stacked receiver room than what he had last year. So it's not, numbers wise, I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar to what it was last season, but I expect a higher completion percentage. I expect better yards per attempt. I expect fewer drops, and I expect a much higher overall efficiency rating.
Maybe this is an opportunity to do a little inside baseball for the viewers and listeners, but I'm curious, when you guys are voting on these teams or these watch lists that sometimes we get pulled into, are you going based on previous production or future projection? Like, are you voting, here's who I think is going to be on the team at the end of the year? Or are you voting, here are the guys who I think were the best last year that are coming back for another year? Because I feel like you can go different ways, which might be why some of us, voted the way that we did for some of these guys.
I project what I think it's going to be in December. Personally,
I more heavily weigh previous, production, but I also weigh what I think is going to happen. But I lean much more on previous production.
Yeah, I try to find a balance between the two because, like, for example, I just personally, I can't put a quarterback who has started one SEC game right as my first team quarterback. He might be at the end of the year, but I think that especially when you're creating a preseason All-America team, to me, that's an honor more than it is a projection, right? It's more saying this is a guy who, yes, we expect to continue to get better, but also is already there. Because, again, Arch is going to be in very good shape. Let's be clear about that. But, I think that there are years where you have a player who, again, maybe you're really excited about this year and he flops or he just doesn't have the role that you expect. I want to see some level of proven production before I put him on an All-America team.
I'm Richard and John. I'm glad that you guys are on the show today because let's say this here. Lenora Sellers was picked by one voter. I'm looking at it here. And that was you, John. Arch Manning was picked by two voters. Richard Johnson and Bud Elliott, friend of the show, Cover 3 podcast.
Oh, the recruiting guy. That's crazy.
You guys are on the outside of the graph here. So why Lenora Sellers, number one, John? Let's start with you, man.
So to me, I think I kind of middled what we're talking about here. Is I looked at some previous production and then future projection. I think that if he does what he's capable of, I think he could. I mean, we know he's an athletic freak. We saw moments where he started turning on, especially at the end of the season, where it looked like, I think the Cam Newton stuff's a little unfair, but maybe the closest thing we have to a modern day Cam Newton is what we can see with Sellers. I went on their campus earlier this year, spent some time with Lenoris. I think Mike Shula is going to help him elevate. We know Mike Shula is a QB guru. I'm bullish on Sellers this year. I think he's going to take a leap. So I thought, all right, I've already seen some of it. I think there's an extra 25%, if not more, where he elevates up. And if South Carolina is good, he's a huge part of it. And here's the other thing. We as Heisman voters and things like that, we love guys that are fun to watch. I think he's going to have those dazzling plays that oh my gosh, I've never seen this or haven't seen it in 15 years. And I think Sellers will get votes because of that.
Am I the only person here who doesn't have a Heisman vote?
I don't have a Heisman vote.
I finally got mine back. I finally got mine back last year after 12 years.
No, I don't. I've
right,
emailed
Sean.
the Heisman
Me
Trust.
and you, Sean. Me and
yeah,
you.
well, I've emailed the Heisman. I mean, it's one of those things, right, where it's there's 1,000 voters, so really not that big a deal. But also, it's just one of those things where it's dude, I feel like I've accomplished enough that it's kind of a little offensive that I'm not a Heisman voter. You know what I mean? It's you go to random ex-newspaper guy who hasn't worked in the industry in 15 years and they're voting for the Heisman and I'm over here not it's almost just more insulting than anything else.
I will take your thoughts and take them into consideration as I put together my vote. I'll let you guys feel like you're part of the process.
Hey, don't laugh because I've seen Heisman voters go on their message boards and say, who would you vote for? I'm not voting for anybody. Just tell me who to vote for. And they do it.
Yeah,
talk about questionable.
Yeah. And that's why, again, I like the way that they distribute, for example, the voters across the country and stuff and have that sort of tie. But it's again, there are the guys who I mean, not to single out like Alabama or whatever, but they just like watch Alabama and Auburn, and that's really all they do. And they're like, who the hell is Michael Penix? Why would I care about that guy? And I do think, the Christian McCaffrey thing was obviously one of the more notable examples of that. It's not necessarily, again, I think that the Derrick Henry was a very deserving winner, but it's like, it's real, right? Like, it's real that there are a lot of guys who aren't even in the industry anymore who have a lot of influence on what happens there.
All right, back to the All-American team, the CBSSports.com, VI. Anybody that was on the team, maybe a second teamer, even someone that's just on the periphery that you voted for to be on the team that didn't make it, that we should be keeping an eye on? Any names?
Yeah, I'll throw Jordyn Tyson out there. To me, clearly the best returning receiver in the Big 12. And, Jeremiah Smith is unimpeachable. Let's be clear about that. I think that I would have had Jordyn Tyson on the team over Ryan Williams. That can change certainly, but I don't think people realize how big a role he played in Arizona State's rise and the development also of Sam Leavitt. I think that there's a really good case, if he's healthy for that Texas game, that they have a really good shot to win that game, which probably not a hot take with, a game that went to double overtime, but like, he is a dynamic player. He's one of those that I talked about who started somewhere else, transferred into Arizona State, went 2 years through their system, now has a chance to come back, and I think will turn into a second or third round draft pick. And so I would have had him alongside Jeremiah Smith on my team.
I had R. Mason Thomas, Oklahoma edge rusher, on my ballot.
Good call.
That guy is an absolute bucket. They call him the closer. Third down, game end. I mean, he ended the game against Auburn, for instance. He's a tremendous, tremendous player. I got to talk to him a little bit at SEC Media Days. He was on my ballot, did not make our official ballot on CBSSports.com.
Yeah, I'll go off of that. I had Dennis Sutton, Penn State. I don't think he made first or second team for us. I just feel like he's a guy who's going to be game record for them, losing Abdul Carter. I think he's the one you're going to elevate up even more, and a big part of their defense. Jim Knowles, I think, can help unlock him even more. I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Mateo Uiagalelei at Oregon. When he was thrown into the mix right about in the Ohio State game, and he really performed very well in that, and then continued on throughout the season when he was thrown on the field as a starter. I think he's going to take another step forward for a Oregon team that I've notoriously have said that I think is going to underperform this year. But what's going to keep them in games is that defense. They're going to be really, really good on defense, and Mateo is going to be one of the big, big reasons why. Okay. All right. You guys want to end the show with something that was a topic like back in 2006, 2008, and seems to come up every 3 to 4 years still? I'm talking GRUMORS. GRUMORS. GRUMORS are back, guys.
Yeah,
and
2008.
And they will be back during the coaching carousel this upcoming season. Jon Gruden visited Georgia recently and had this to tell the team.
Hey, the only reason I really came here is I want to coach again. I'm being honest with you. I do not bullshit either. I want to coach again. I'd die to coach in the SEC. I would love it. I would fucking love it.
He would love it. He would effing love it, guys. All right. So as you guys know, as my colleagues, a year ago, last September, I went down to Tampa and hung out with Jon Gruden for a few hours. It was quite the experience. I visited the Fired Football Coaches Association, as he calls it, which is this gigantic office building with a lot of different rooms in it, and each room is devoted to his previous coaching stops. So you have a Packers room, you've got a Raiders room, et cetera, et cetera. Game film everywhere. This guy is legit, as you guys know, a football junkie. He lives and breathes it. I don't think he does anything else in his life other than golf. And he told me back in September, I want to get into college coaching. It interests me, but it's got to be the right situation. And by right situation is what you just saw there on the tape. He wants a Power 5 gig or a Power 4 gig, and specifically he wants the SEC, which interesting timing because you're probably going to have 4 or 5 jobs come open in the SEC this year. We'll talk more about my visit down there, but how realistic, though, would Jon Gruden's job prospects actually be? Looking beyond, of course, his coaching record, which he's about a 500 coach in the NFL. He's never coached as a head coach in college football. In fact, last time he was there was 1989 at Pacific as a tight ends coach. So what makes us think that he would, one, succeed as a college coach, but two, why should he be hired considering his past? And Richard, I wanted to go to you on all this.
Well, Brandon, first and foremost, let's remember he's talking about trying to get a job at a Power 4 school because he ain't going to get a job in the NFL again. Right now, he is currently suing the NFL. They're embroiled in a lawsuit that just moved out of Nevada court, probably will be appealed by the NFL. But right now, it seems like there may be discovery, and we know that that is not something the NFL wants at all. So we'll see if that ends up either getting appealed by the NFL or getting settled, even though Jon Gruden says he does not want to settle it. At the end of the day, coaching is a privilege. Coaching in the SEC is a privilege. Coaching in the NFL is a privilege. Coaching at your local high school is a privilege. We have to remember why Jon Gruden is not a coach of the Las Vegas Raiders right now and why he resigned. Among the emails obtained by the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, racist tropes about former NFLPA executive DeMaurice Smith, homophobic language about Commissioner Roger Goodell and gay players in the NFL, misogynistic language about women referees. Jon Gruden has apologized for that, but at the end of the day, he said what he said. He wrote what he wrote, I should say, in emails that were obtained by the media. Any athletic director who would want to hire Jon Gruden or any parent who would send their son to play for Jon Gruden need to be aware that Jon Gruden isn't coaching anywhere right now for a reason. Coaching and being the leader of a program, the front face of a program, the highest paid state employee in a lot of states in this country, that's a privilege. And you might not just be able to walk back in to do that after saying what Jon Gruden said, even though it was years ago.
I think what's interesting about this too is again, you just laid out a lot of stuff, right? That's horrendous and is disqualifying in many cases to be a head football coach. Let's evaluate him as a football candidate as well, right? He hasn't had a 10-win season in the NFL since 2008. Me and Richard were enjoying our freshman year of high school that year. So it's been a while since he's had any success whatsoever as a coach anyway. And also you talk about, right? I know that he's a football junkie. I know he loves coaching football, finding out concepts, all this stuff. That doesn't really have a lot to do with being an SEC coach these days, right? You are a CEO of a program at this point. You are dealing with budgets and spreadsheets and payrolls. It's not just getting to go in and coach ball. My big question with this too, because I think that, for example, it would be possible for him to get a G5 job or something like that if you really pushed for it. But when you've been a multiple time Super Bowl winning NFL head coach, are you going to take the Troy job? Right?
No.
Are you going to take the Western Michigan job? Right? Is that something that you realistically are going to do? Because look, Bill Belichick is the greatest football coach of all time at the NFL level. And people are still why did North Carolina do that? A team that's middle of the pack usually in the ACC. Well, now you've got a coach who doesn't even have the success of a Bill Belichick. And we're questioning whether he can get an SEC head coaching job. I just don't see the vision there. And I don't think ultimately when Jon Gruden hears what the job is as well, that it's going to make a whole lot of sense for him to come in.
I would just say never underestimate the desperation that programs have, both to be relevant and to try to win. So I think in college football, the only guy who is 100% toxic is Art Briles. We know that guy's not coming back because people have tried to, and that guy's out. But everybody else, I think, is in somewhat fair game. And I can remember talking to a group of 6 AD within the last hiring cycle or two who asked me, he's like, how do you think it would go over if we hired Jon Gruden? He was interested in it. Now, that's not the hire they ended up making, but especially for programs that need some juice, need a reason to try to be relevant, I think Gruden would fit into that. And Brandon, I remember, when you were working on that story, talking to different people around the industry, it wasn't a complete no. I mean, I think certain ADs were like, I would consider it. Now, Power 4 is a higher bar, to Shahan's point. There are some that clearly are not going to ever feel a need to have to hire a Jon Gruden. But I think the lesser programs that need some juice, need to raise some money, I think they'd be interested in Gruden because he does have some juice. We can see him charm. He's got a lot of baggage. We know all about that. But I think some ADs, they're willing to overlook it in this current environment. I could be wrong, but that's just the vibe that I get.
No, John, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, if they want to, they will. They will explain quite literally whatever they have to do. They'll explain it away. They'll say it was in the past. They'll say he apologized. They say he's a better person. They'll say time heals all wounds. They'll do whatever they have to do to get through the initial press conference, the initial backlash, and to move on. I have no doubt about that, John.
Yeah. So this is a very muddy situation, and not even counting the emails and what he did and didn't do as a head coach in the NFL, especially near the end of his tenure with the Raiders and his other second and third chances. This is a guy that when I talked to him in his office was like so against everything that was happening in college football, like offensively and schematically. Like he hates it. He hates what he sees on Saturdays. In fact, I'm going to read some quotes from me from my story last September. He goes, a lot of the passes, they're not even passes. They're running plays with built-in pass adjustments. You guys call them RPOs. I call it ridiculous pass protection offense. And I can't stand the clapping snap count. He said, don't tell me the game is evolving. The game is dissolving from a sophistication standpoint. You don't see 21 personnel. You don't see 13 personnel. You don't see a quarterback get under the center and take a snap and reverse it out and hand it to a big-time back who's 8 yards deep. This guy's very passionate about football, but he does not like what he sees on Saturdays in college football. So when he sits in front of an athletics director or a search committee, a board of trustees, and they go through days of vetting him and discussing all of his past and everything, they go, so what's your plan for us? He'll go, we need to play like it's 1982.
Sean, what do you think a quarterback is going to do the first time Jon Gruden would ask him to rattle off one of those encyclopedic West Coast offense play calls that he is so famous for with the Raiders and the Bucs? Look up that video of Chris Sims trying to get the cadence down in training camp years ago with the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm trying to imagine like a kid who's only played Texas high school football and run the air raid
with the charts, right? With the
the signs above their heads, then try to have to go into a 7-step drop so that they can try to drop a 4-yard out to a receiver who's not open. Like, it's just listen, the reason that they don't do that stuff at the college level is because the 19-year-olds that have been on campus for 2 weeks aren't capable of learning it at an expedient enough rate. And by the way, too, I think that some of this was a little bit of an adjustment, for example, for an NFL guy in Deion Sanders coming in to be like, hey, the reason that people aren't running more NFL concepts isn't because they just don't think about it. It's because you can't protect long enough with offensive linemen that have been in the program for 7 weeks. It's just a different kind of game when you have that level of protection, that level of quarterback development. Like, again, and this is where I go back to that idea that Jon Gruden would hate coaching college football, and he doesn't know what college football entails. The reason that they're running RPOs is because it's a cheat code versus the way that you're able to block at this level, and it compensates for not having good enough offensive linemen. The reason that you run a spread and space offenses is because of the way the hashes are laid out. It is a completely different sport in so many key ways than the NFL, not even getting into the players just literally being worse.
As KMC says in the comments section, Gruden's offensive scheme would be too complicated for college players. He'd have to dumb it down a lot. No, absolutely. We agree with that. If you guys remember when he ever did that quarterback show with ESPN, remember Cam Newton winning the Heisman Trophy and he got in there and he told him to call out a play and he says, we don't have terminology. Like, we don't call out a play.
Remember when Jackson Dart went through his cadence?
Yeah. And that's what Gruden hates. He absolutely hates it. I'll end with this. Gruden was this is a year ago. He had been studying, talking to all kinds of college ADs and coaches about the game, trying to learn about it. I believe he would be successful from the transfer portal and maybe even recruitment aspect of it to a certain extent. I think he would get people around him. That celebrity would attract some people, right? To a certain extent, a type of player, right? I do think that just game day coaching, where he actually prides himself on, I think that's where he would struggle because of his philosophies. I don't think he would do what he is capable of winning in college football these days. And I think it'd be quite the learning curve. I think he'd have to check his ego at the door. And that's a very difficult ask for a coach who's been doing it this way his entire career. And also, listen, guys, I was told by someone today, I was reaching out to other people because I'm working on something else about him, about has his image improved or whatever going into this cycle. I was told that he was interested in the UCF job last year, that he would have taken it if offered. They never went down that road, of course. But I tend to think that someone's going to take a shot at him, and he's going to be a head coach at a Power 5 program, Power 4 program here within the next year. That's just my thoughts. Because someone, as John and you guys mentioned earlier, you're going to need to rile up a fan base, and if he fits your culture and all that, he's someone that'll fit. And
Auburn coach Jon Gruden coming up now.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about Auburn. But I will say this also. He told me he came close to taking the Tennessee job once. He says he actually did come close. But man, he probably missed his chance to coach college football and maybe contend for a championship, because I just don't know. I just don't know how his scheme and philosophy goes with it. All right, that's long enough on Jon Gruden. There will be GRUMORS in November and December, and we will be covering it, of course, along with all of college football. We had a great show today, guys. A lot of intel from preseason camps, a lot of stuff breaking down. Make sure to like and subscribe here on YouTube, the College Football Insiders on CBS Sports College Football, and subscribe and follow us on all your podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify. And hey, give us a 5-star rating, if for nothing less, for me being the oldest person here, and I'm not going to be around very long, and I need something to smile about. That'll do it. We will be back next week, 2 days a week through the preseason. We'll be back Monday and Wednesday next week with much more inside notes here on College Football Insiders.